Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ed Carbajal. Ed, tell the fans what we got this week.
Well, we're joined by the illustrious Dr. Jon Lucas, who likes to come in and school us on what we don't know about the medical side of combat sports. You're still the resident physician over there, Doc?
That is correct.
South Carolina, right?
Yep.
Welcome back to the show, man. Glad to have you.
Oh, thanks. Glad to be here.
First things first, I guess, glad to see that you made it through the hurricanes. Obviously, a lot of thoughts and prayers for the people around you in the Carolinas, but without getting too deep, are things starting to get cleaned up a little bit, or is it still ugly out there right now?
Yeah, I mean, things weren't as bad right here in the upstate of South Carolina as they were just north of us. It was really the western North Carolina mountains that got just absolutely shellacked because they got so much rain after already having had a full week's worth of rain. So, I mean, they had flooding that no one that's currently alive has ever seen before, and hopefully we'll never see again. So, I mean, there's major roads out. Interstate 40 is still it's open, but I think they're having to alternate traffic on the one lane of the four that's still passable. It's very difficult to get to Asheville. There's still lots of people in the city of Asheville that don't have clean drinking water. The water that comes out of their tap isn't safe to drink because it got contaminated during. So it's still really bad, and it's going to be a while before Western North Carolina gets back to normal. Even around here, just driving down a normal road, you'll see a pile, 40 feet wide and a couple hundred yards long of just trees that were chopped up small enough to be picked up by a skid steer that are sitting by the road waiting to be picked up, because it's like that everywhere. So they're going to be doing cleanup for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's it's tough to hear, but I'm glad that you made it through it and you're able to. You'd made it through it. Joining us is a secondary to obviously making it through that. So I guess one thing that kind of broke before you came on today was that the UFC for 309, which we're going to do picks on later, is going back to the gloves, the previous gloves.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, medically, we can talk the stats and everything. Off the top of your head, would there be anything about a glove that's essentially 99% the exact same that would really make any difference, at least for the KOs? Let's assume that the eye pokes are down a little bit. I don't know if they are or not, but let's assume they're down and they're working a little bit, but there hasn't been any knockouts. Would anything on the glove affect that?
I don't think so. I mean, the glove is the same weight and the construction is fairly similar. It's pretty difficult to think that would make a tremendous difference in knockouts. I mean, a bigger glove you can hide behind a little bit better, but the gloves are not significantly big enough that, shelling up like you do in boxing is going to offer any significant protection. I don't think there's a difference enough in the padding that it would make the impact a lot different. So I don't think that it's likely that they're reducing knockouts. If there was a straightforward way to do that, if they could prove that there was a glove that could reduce knockouts, you would expect some amateur organizations to be jumping on that. Like USA Boxing, where it's mostly kids that are less than 18, they would be on that in a heartbeat to try to reduce the likelihood of traumatic brain injury in their kids. So I don't think so.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I wonder if it's curious what the rationale is. I mean, I know it's New York and they always get weird with combat sports lately. So I wonder what the rationale behind that is, if it had anything to do with anyone on the medical side with the commission there. But, with the we were kind of talking about it before we started recording, this November, new unified rules in the sport. I think we were all kind of in agreement about the 12-6 elbows. I mean, as somebody, when that comes across your desk, as somebody that does what you do for the combat sports on the medical side, because you're also a fan too. Like, folks that have listened to the podcast you've been on before, you're also a fan too. But tell us your initial reaction when you see that, as a medical professional that's in the business of fighting. What was your reaction?
Yes, I mean, I was real happy to see that rule get overturned. There's really no evidence that a 12-6 elbow is in any way more dangerous than any other elbow. We've all seen the video of people describing how you can throw an elbow from a different way or a knee from a different way with a lot more power than you can when you're stuck on the ground trying to go 12-6, or when you're standing trying to go 12-6. And it's from a fan perspective. You always go back to the John Jones loss due to that was due to a 12-6 elbow, wasn't it? That was really like 11:30 to 5:30.
Yeah.
Depending on which way your head is tilted when you're watching that, it's really hard to tell. So I think it'll be beneficial from a fan standpoint to not have to have the referee spending the couple of seconds trying to figure out whether that elbow was legal or not based on exactly what angle it was coming at. And from a safety standpoint, I don't think it presents any greater danger to the fighters at all. There's the urban myth that all came from somebody, I think, on the Nevada Commission being concerned that they had seen a 70s movie where someone was breaking concrete blocks with a 12-6 elbow. I don't know if that's true. Wouldn't surprise me at all if it was, but it was one of those things that, Big John and his buddies argued that until they were blue in the face and they just didn't get any leeway. So like, okay, fine, we'll ban the 12-6 elbow. And then it just stayed in effect for, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's funny though, because I can't think of an instance, and maybe there was one, I'm sure there was one, of any time in the last 25 years of anybody being carded or taking a point away for throwing a 12-6 elbow. I mean, it's essentially been a non-relevant. I mean, other than John Jones' issue, it's kind of funny that it's not even. It's just it took this long without it ever being something.
And no one got. I'm unaware of anybody ever having been seriously injured with that strike where they couldn't have been. Anyway, I mean, the most devastating strike I ever saw was the knee to Cyborg's skull, and that was and is still perfectly legal. Yeah. You're not going to do that with a 12-6 elbow.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other rule that they changed, right? The downed opponent rule. That was the other one.
Correct. Yeah. So, and I really like that, especially if we could get all the commissions across the country to actually obey the Association of Boxing Commissions and make the unified rules truly unified. Because, in the big promotions like the UFC, the guys and girls that are fighting there, they do this all the time. It's their main job, so they can bring people into their camp and have people watching their fights that are aware of the rules and the jurisdiction they're going to. But when you're watching a local/regional fight in South Carolina, and there's a guy here from Alabama, and there's a girl from West Virginia, in the rules where they fought their last 8 fights are a little bit different. It's so hard to, in the heat of battle, remember that this is the place where you're not allowed a knee at all, or that you're not allowed to do, whatever. So you'll see people kind of like freeze for a split second. Yeah, that turns out poorly sometimes. So having them unified, if everybody will agree to accept the unified rules, will be real helpful. And it'll also get away from the game people like to play where they're standing, they're up against the fence, and they hold their hand an inch off the canvas. And anytime a strike comes in their direction, they touch the canvas, and then they pick their hand back up, and then they touch the canvas. That won't work anymore.
Yeah, and I think we've already seen some good examples of that with recent events too. That for both the downed opponent and the elbow, at least with action, I liked how I forget who the 2 fighters were, where the guy was playing guard or something, and the 12-6 elbow just made the guy move and made the fight kind of like not stall. The referee didn't really have to get involved. So I think we're seeing a lot of good things from that. The other thing I wanted to ask you was as far as like what would you think is the worst case scenario from a medical standpoint of I mean, because like you even just said about the cyborg knee, the worst damage that someone's going to get, especially from that close, I mean, is a couple of lumps, maybe a cut, right?
Death.
Yeah. I mean, if they do, and then death, obviously. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think that the likelihood that the 12-6 elbow represents an increased risk for injury is smaller. The thing that we worry about the most, I think, would be either soccer kick or a knee to a grounded opponent whose head is trapped against the bottom rail of a cage. That would, I haven't seen that happen. I hope I never do. But I mean, when you have no ability to have any give at all from your neck or your thorax to, move back a little bit when someone throws a full-on power knee, if they're over you kind of like in a turtle position and you're laying on your side with your head against that bottom rail, I would not want to get kneed in the face or the forehead like that, because, even Cyborg's knee, at least that the head had the ability to move back a little bit, but when it's truly trapped, that particular blow might be an issue. But
Yeah, I think the 12-6 elbows are going to play the biggest part along the cage. I think when you see people picking at knees and ankles, I don't think it's not going to be as technical for the fighter to throw it. They're just going to be able to basically throw any elbow they can physically throw at the top of the guy's head. That's the other thing. I feel like when you think of the old Kung Fu stuff, it's a lot of, UFC 2, there was a early prelim, Robert Lucarelli and Orlando Veit. And Orlando Veit walked around the ring, and it was kind of like an old blood sport. It could have been a movie. I mean, he literally rolled up on the guy and started throwing 12-6 elbows to the back of his neck and spine and, soccer kicking him while kind of acknowledging the crowd. And it really it was a violent early fight in the sport. But without the shots to the back of the neck and head and the spine, I don't think that the elbows are going to play a huge part. I did hear some people say, who are fighters, that perhaps if the mount might become more dangerous now because there's a little less hand fighting involved with throwing a 12-6. You can kind of you can break the guard a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what it brings. And I mean, it's going to favor guys like John Jones, obviously. You're long, lanky. If he gets you in he's a hard guy to wrap up once he gets you in the mount, as seen by, every fight of his career when he's got that position. So I don't know. I'd be interested to see, but it doesn't sound like there's really going to be any more drastic. In theory, there shouldn't be any more drastic injuries or trauma to the fighters.
Right. And I assume that out there somewhere, there's an MMA fighter who's just been waiting for this day because he knows the perfect opportunity to do a 12-6 that none of us has ever thought of. And we're going to see it, and it's going to become the new calf kick. There's going to be this one time that, there's some wrestling takedown that you're stuck in the wrong position at the wrong time, and a 12-6 is undefendable, and we'll see it. So it'll be interesting to see who it is that figures out where it's, the perfect technique.
Yeah. It will be. I mean, it's definitely. From what I've seen so far, it's definitely seems to increase action. I don't see stalling like from positions like we did before, and I don't know why I was so surprised to see it, especially this past weekend. But I was not surprised, but happier to see it / surprised. What's your take on the environment that fighters fight in? Because the 169 event, Matt and I were kind of like chirping back and forth, getting frustrated because they used the ring versus a cage for I know their events are varied, so maybe that's their excuse. But like, as somebody that does what you do in your state, I mean, do you think the environment that they're fighting in kind of matters as far as the types of injuries and things that can happen?
Yeah, it can. And I think the most important thing is that the fighters are fighting in the environment that they're used to training in. If someone's used to training in a ring where you can get to the edge of the ropes and, duck your head on the other side, so it's a little bit harder to hit when you're grounded and grappling, versus now suddenly being in a cage where you can't do that. There's no room to put anything under, I think makes a big difference. In you can do things up against boxing ropes when you're boxing. When you're standing, you can duck, dodge, and weave and lean back. That doesn't work so good in the cage. So if your defense is keeping your hips relatively still and moving your head around and bobbing and weaving and whatnot, and the first time you're going to try to do that against a professional fighter is in a cage, is going to be in your actual match. That's going to be a problem. But I don't think there's consistently one that's better than the other.
What about as far as on the officiating side? I mean, what's your take on? Because the main event, Matt and I kind of had an issue with, because he was carding Malikan and stuff like that, and about getting entangled, accusing him of grabbing the rope, but there's ropes, and like me and Matt were kind of like, you're gonna get their ropes, you're gonna get tangled up if you grapple against them. It's like you said, it's not like keeping your hips still and bouncing off of them like a boxer. They're reaching out. I mean, the rope might be in the way of my path. It's just, as an official, like, I don't know. I feel like they need to be trained in both, or be more leniency.
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, you'll never hear me argue that officials shouldn't be better trained, regardless of what the issue is. I think that that's definitely important. But if I were fighting in a ring, I would definitely want an official who is used to watching and reffing fights in the ring. And same thing in the cage, because like we see it in local kickboxing shows. You get someone who's a retired pro kickboxer from the 70s and 80s and has, refereed 1,000 matches.
Mhm.
And they know when someone accidentally got their, elbow stuck under the ring when they were throwing, or under the rope when they were throwing an uppercut or
Mhm.
reaching for a clinch, versus someone who's trying to sneak hold onto the rope to hold the person in the clinch. And someone who's used to watching in refereeing MMA in a cage, or has never done anything in a ring before, is going to have a much harder time figuring that out. And they also have, I think they have a harder time knowing where to look to see the person holding the rope, because it's going to be typically the opposite side that you would be grabbing with your fingers in a cage.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, to clear up a couple things. First of all, I love MMA in a ring, so I have no issue with MMA in a ring. It's kind of what John just alluded to, though. It's that my issue was Herb Dean refereeing the fight. And listen, I don't like Herb Dean as a referee. As a person, I have no idea. I'm not a fan of him as a referee, so I'm biased. I'm gonna be known right now. But he doesn't referee a lot of MMA in rings. It's just the truth of the matter. Statistically, it's probably 1 in every 300 fights he does. And that might even be generous towards the ring at this point. I think that, and if I'm one, I just don't reason putting the heavyweight championship when we have an undefeated fighter who's kind of being talked about on the outskirts as like, maybe this guy is better than John Jones and Stipe, and maybe he's really the real deal. He's undefeated. He's mopping up dudes, knocking them out. So we're going to throw him we're going to put him in a ring in Bangkok. The event was scheduled for Atlanta, so it was clearly supposed to be in a cage up until 3 weeks ago. So I doubt, like John was saying, training. I don't know if Malkin was training in Russia or wherever he was training in his ring. So I love it. I love watching it. I love the look of it in a ring, but I just don't understand putting your heavyweight, especially when it's two guys who there's going to be some clinch work. Guys are going to be up against the ropes. It just seemed like it. And Herb Dean, I've never seen. We all watched Pride, so we watched hundreds of fights in a ring. We watched the PFL or IFL and all those back in the day. M1 Global Challenge, all those. I don't remember a situation where a referee ever told a guy he couldn't kind of reach around the ropes if it meant defending yourself to like grab a guy who's on top of you. Herb Dean's asking him to swim his arm under the ropes, which is now blocked by his opponent's hips and body. I mean, when you're reaching around to hold a guy, it just was odd. I've never seen it be like so blatant. Like, you kind of got to accept that the ropes are going to be in the way, and unless somebody's, like you said, trying to use it as an advantage, as opposed to it's the only where place my hand can go to block my face from being punched. I'm not real sure how it was played, but it was really weird, and it kind of goes with what one's doing right now. I mean, they had some fun show in Colorado, but they stripped Rod Tang of his title he was a half pound now. He's got to make weight, yada yada. But they have a tough weight making thing over there with their hydration clause and all that.
Have you read that, John? It's so confusing to me. Have you read their hydration?
It's been quite a while, but they made a really good effort to try to eliminate, the quote unquote cheating from dehydrating yourself and doing a big water cut. But there's no way to do that without having a very convoluted system and multiple checks and whatnot, which is one of the reasons why I think that's floundering here in the U.S. Even out in California, where they were real hot to trot about that not that long ago, that seems to have fallen off the radar screen as a possibility because it's just so unwieldy.
Yeah, it's like a 10-pound gap that they're giving people to kind of like have a window of not killing themselves. I remember when it first came out too. I do remember everybody was kind of like, hey, that's a nice, it's nice that they try to change something, but it just seems like it's caused more problems. You already had two champions stripped on the scale.
To me, it's suicide for them. Especially if they want to put Vince on the US. In the last couple months, you got rid of Sage Northcutt. You got rid of Musa Mechi. You got rid of Rod Tang's no longer your champion. He will be again, assuming. Yeah. It seems. And then there's other names too that we're forgetting, DeRitter, and some of these guys are letting go. It seems odd, and I've Musa Mechi's the first grappler ever in my life where I've had like friends texting me asking when his next match is, and whether it's not because he's out there, he's not. the greatest submission artist of all time, but it's because of his whole character and everything, and people were interested. So it just seems odd that you'd tick these guys off, and I don't know. I mean, they got to make weight, they got to be professional, but at the same time, it just seems like, you make leniency for everything. Like, I kind of think that the gloves are being changed this weekend because John Jones feels comfortable sticking his fingers out. I mean,
yeah, it's hard to argue against that.
And I think that might be our segue into 309, but it just seems to me like that would make and maybe it was an agreement between the two of these guys. Hey, we each haven't fought in a while. We've never fought with these other gloves. Why are we going to go out with this, especially if it's our retirement fight? Let's be comfortable. And I'd be happier if that was the case and they just kind of opened it up. But I also think it opens up now. If John Jones loses by disqualification because of an eye poke, does he now get a chance to go back and file for an appeal when the gloves get changed eventually full time again? But anyways, let's jump into really 309 and see what we got going on, because it is a pay-per-view weekend, and those are usually always good and fun.
Before we jump into that, John, just because of that news came out just before we start about the glove changes, do you think it would have been somebody on the medical side of somebody that does what you do? Would somebody say, hey, you can't use these because they're a quarter inch less thick, or it's a different type of rubber inside the glove? Like,
I doubt it. That's, physicians oftentimes forget that just because they're an expert in one area of medicine, they're not an expert in everything. But I doubt that there would be a physician who would have done, that would be more like an engineering kind of question. I doubt that a physician would have had enough gumption to stand up and say, hey, I don't think these gloves are safe because of X, Y, or Z, unless it was after a significant injury. That's the typical ringside physician is not a guy who's training and, has a history of boxing or doing MMA and stuff like that. They probably don't know a whole lot about in general. I'm sure there's exceptions to that, but in general, they're not doing a lot of deep analysis, I think, glove wise. So I doubt that was a physician.
I think if it would have been the commission in New York, we'd be hearing about it from Dana White right now. It was a decision to be made. If it was the commission, Dana White would be bashing them about how they changed things and he never wants to come back. We know how the routine would go, but
he usually saves that for the end, though.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe you don't want to.
He usually saves it for the end because they got to make their money first before.
That's true. That's true. You might be right. I wouldn't be surprised. We'll see. My bet would be Jones wants the old gloves back, and I mean, it sounds like he gets what he wants. Dana White's not exactly going against anything that favors Jones at this moment, but yeah, let's look at it. I know early on in the prelims, we got our guy Chris Weidman on there.
Jim Miller's on there. A lot of East Coast greats. Mickey Gall out of Jersey's on there.
That Chris Weidman fight could be interesting. Eric Anders is no joke. That could be a very, very good fight. I think last time I looked, Eric was favored to win by a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see what Chris Weidman shows up and what he's got going on.
He looked good in his last fight, so we'll hope that he continues that momentum. I mean, even the fights he lost, most of them he didn't look terrible. At least early on, in the first early losses, he was usually winning the fights before kind of fading or getting. I don't even remember the situation with Mousasi now. I don't even remember which way it went, but I remember it being involving the rule change of the grounded fighters. So, but yeah, looks like it's a good prelim. I mean, kind of typical New York prelims.
They stacked the card with local guys to, kind of pack the house a little bit.
Okay, there you go.
But yeah, it should be fun. I mean, I don't know. People are complaining about the card. I don't mind it. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're going to sell it out. I got to be honest. If we're looking at the main card, this fight in the beginning. I mean, do you guys know anything about these two? I know nothing about them.
I know Rufi's on a 2-fight win streak, and Ilana Top or whatever, is on a losing streak. So, or a 2-fight losing streak. Rufi's on undefeated, for 10-1. But I'm gonna take Rufi to win. I don't know a lot about these guys though, and this is you mentioned the complaints. There's a couple of complaints that The couple of the main card fights are so before you get to the meat and potatoes of the main card.
Yeah,
Doc,
I'm hoping this turns into one of those cards where, you look at it ahead of time, you're like, I don't know who these guys are. And they just put on these awesome fights that, back and forth, got nothing to lose, and they don't know a whole lot about each other. So sometimes those make great fights. I'm hoping this is one of those cases. But I agree with what Matt said. Just looking at his win streak, and I'm not sure that I've ever seen him fight before, but it seems like everybody that's kind of looked over these guys and what's been going on with them recently are kind of leaning pretty heavily towards Roofy winning. He's a pretty big favorite as well.
Yeah, minus 750. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna pick him just because of that reason. As I was getting my notes together for this today, I was like, I don't know anything about these guys. Can't say the same for these ladies though. I mean, this one's definitely.
I wonder, just real quick, I wonder if we're gonna get a last minute change like we did a couple weeks ago. I wonder if we see Weidman and Anders on that spot. Or
I wouldn't be
you know
surprised.
what I mean? Like I wouldn't be surprised because we're not the first people to go. This is not necessarily pay-per-view fight expected, but you never know. It could be Burgos and and just get a all-out banger to start. But this one, what we got here? Karina Silva and Viviana Araujo. What do you got there, Ed?
We'll let Doc Lucas pick first as a guest.
So I like Silva in this. Isn't the other girl, isn't she a late replacement? I thought I had somebody that she was fighting somebody else earlier. Maybe I'm confused, but I think that Karine probably has this under control. She's has history of being a decent striker, decent grappler. She's like 18-4. She's got the experience. I'm going to look at things in her direction. She's coming off a win. The girl she's fighting, Viviane, is coming off a loss. So we'll see what happens, but I'm going to go with Karine on this.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I actually, you kind of said everything I wanted to say too, as far as coming off a win. She's a minus 278 favorite versus the plus 225 underdog based on the DraftKings odds that they have on the UFC website. So easy to agree with you.
Yeah, same with that one. Araujo's lost 2 out of last 3. Good competition, but I'll go with Silva, up and coming prospect there at that weight class.
Hold on, my mouse died, so I got to use this freaking touchpad mouse. This one, yeah, I'm.
Yeah,
you guys go ahead.
I think Paul Craig has an opportunity to shock the world, but I'm not a bettor. But I don't think that if I were, I would not be betting against Bo Nickel. I mean, that guy is an absolute beast. He's a fantastic wrestler. I don't see Paul having a good answer for him. I think this is going to be another cruise to victory for Bo.
Yeah, I'm tending to agree. I mean, I feel like if this fight was 20 years ago, you'd be going, okay, this is the chance for the BJJ guy to catch the wrestler in a triangle and, and stop the momentum. But now we know it nowadays, you got him. Bo Nickel is well-versed, obviously, in BJJ, has fought the top grapplers in the world in submission grappling events. I don't see him falling victim to that. Now that's not to say that if you slap on a triangle that you're just going to get out of it. So if he makes a mistake or slips into the guard and you never know. But yeah, I think Nickel wins by. I mean, it wouldn't even surprise me if it was late first round TKO. I could see him just mauling Craig, and that's where I'm leaning.
Yeah, that's the thing with wrestlers. I mean, he's minus 1,000 on the odds for this fight, Bo Nickel, and I'm picking him as well. And that's one thing, with all the fighters I talk to, all the fighters with a wrestling base that I talk to, especially over at Spectation Sports, these up and comers, when they come from wrestling, they're always surprised at how easily, once they pick up striking, how easy it is they can knock folks out with, and it's because they have that explosive, they have that explosive power already from all their explosive training that they do for wrestling. It just translates, into their hands so well. Bo Nickel's a perfect example of that, especially if you watch his second or third fight outside the UFC, the Icon fight, where he fires off a right hand and shuts the dude off. So it's something to behold, but it's one thing that you always got to be careful of when you watch wrestlers come into MMA. This one, Poor Michael Chandler. But go ahead, Doc, if you want to take your pick for this
Yeah,
one.
I think the odds are the closest on this one, but my picks for this card are going to be just for the main card anyways are all straight favorites. But I have a hard time seeing Michael coming and beating Oliveira, even though they're both coming off a loss. But and Charles a bad dude. That's going to be a tough row to hoe. So I'm not sure that Michael's going to be able to get this done. It'd be great if he does, but that's not what I would be anticipating. So I'm going to give the nod to the Brazilian here.
Yeah, I said it when they announced this fight that Chandler had completely dropped the ball, and we were going to see kind of the end of his fame and glory, I think, here. And I love Michael Chandler, one of my favorite fighters of all time, but the whole saga with McGregor was embarrassing, in my opinion, from day one, for somebody that's so well established in the sport to try to ride the coattails of another fighter for 2 years and it basically just blow up in your face. Now you get to rematch the guy who put you out when you fought him. I think Oliveira wins this fight. I'm taking him by submission in the second round. I think we're going to see an older Chandler, and he can come out looking as like superhuman, but you just added age and to your resume, and I don't think that helps very much in fighting.
Yeah, I mean, there's things I always like to bring it up. I know there's no such thing as MMA math, but there are certain things kind of like, water is wet, the sky is blue, and Michael Chandler does not win in Madison Square Garden. So,
I'll be rooting for him. Let's not make a mistake here. I'll be rooting for Michael Chandler, but I don't think he wins this fight, and I don't think the whole last couple of years are going to look good when it's all said and done.
And
for a guy who should be a Hall of Fame fighter.
And I feel like he cursed himself more when everything happened with the Bellator fight that he lost in Madison Square Garden, and then he was just so, like he was so down on fighting there ever again, fighting in New York because of the taxes and everything. And then he's come back so many times. He's trying to be a company man for the UFC, but I feel like deep down inside, because of watching him and being in the same room with him, I feel like he's doing his due diligence as a UFC employee. But you're not winning in Madison Square Garden. Main event.
Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic.
Yeah, so I know that my son's entire firehouse is planning on watching the fights, and they're all in Stipe's corner for obvious reasons. But I have, you talk about ring rust and a long layoff and changing weight classes and whatnot. But on the other hand, it's Jon Jones. I mean, he is a talent like we haven't seen before. I anticipate he's going to come to this perfectly ready. He's walking around or something in like 100 or 250 pounds or so. He's put on a lot of mass. He's not super small for heavyweight. He's actually going to be bigger than Stipe most likely in the actual event. And it would be extremely surprising if he were not perfectly well prepared. So I think this is going to be Jon's fight to lose, and I don't think he's going to do that. I'll be surprised if this goes past a couple of rounds.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. I personally, I'm not even a fan of this fight in general, as much as I'm a fan of both guys individually, or respect for him individually. I think Stipe is going to get crushed. I think he's going to look like every other 42, 43, 44-year-old fighter that we've seen. I mean, we've seen this a million times now, and it's not like, I mean, has anybody ever been knocked out and then 3 years? Maybe Randy Couture when he came back, but he's not fighting Tim Sylvia, and I mean, that's the only kind of comparison I can even think of where a guy was KO'd and then went up and came back, but that wasn't even that long of a 3-year layoff. This is a long time layoff for a guy who had kind of already tied up, kind of already hung it up. I feel like when he won his, he won the trilogy with Cormier, and then he had his back and forth with Ngannou, but it just didn't feel like he was hungry. Obviously, he hasn't been back in 3 years. I don't see how you get that hunger back. You might get it back, but I think he's going to look like an older gentleman in the cage. He's going to be a step slower. And I think Jon Jones is going to do what he wants. And I hope that that's not the case. I hope Stipe can give him a challenge. Because at this point, if Jon Jones wins this fight in 30 seconds with some guillotine choke or, some elbow or, I also, I don't want to act like I can't predict a no contest, but it wouldn't surprise me if Miocic is getting his butt kicked early. If he does get caught with a illegal shot and a poke to the eye, that maybe he doesn't continue. Especially if you're kind of talking about retiring, are you going to go out there with a, I don't know. There's some stuff to that. Jones has obviously not been away from fouls in most of his career. He's done a lot of fouling, so it is possible. I hope that doesn't happen. I think Jones crushes him, and I hope Jones fights Aspinall. That's really what I want to see. I don't want to see any of this other stuff going on. My other prediction, though, is potentially that this fight, they do a double retirement, and they announce Aspinall's fighting at 310 for the real heavyweight championship in December against perhaps Gane or Volkov. They move to one of them. There could be a shuffling on that card. The fact that they haven't announced officially that main event's canceled after we've known for now 3 weeks leads me to believe there might be a bigger shuffle going on than but that's 310. But I don't know. Do you see anything different with that, Ed? I mean, I think
so. Matt, just to be clear, your official prediction is a no contest in the first round due to eye poke.
I mean, honestly, if I could bet that in Vegas, I probably would bet some money on that because it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. Plus, but I don't want to see that happen because I don't want the fans paying money to.
I'm gonna look at those odds up. I feel like those odds got to exist somewhere.
Yeah. Well, you can bet on a no contest. I'm sure. I don't think you can do first round no contest, by eye poke. But
making a note for myself.
It would be ironic if they went back to the old gloves and the main event was ended in 45 seconds due to an illegal eye poke.
Yeah, let's hope not. Don't speak that into existence.
No, and believe me, I'm the last one. The people that paid their money to go there. I don't. Everybody else can deal with it, but yeah, the people that paid hundreds of dollars to be there don't deserve to have that be the finality of the night. But yeah, it's Jon Jones. I feel like anything's possible. I feel like this fight card could change. We know
that's literally you're taking what I'm about to say. I mean, Jon Jones events have been canceled literally like the night before.
This fight might be in LA. I might be going to it on Saturday. You never know.
Yeah. With a Jon Jones card, you really never know. I mean, that's one thing you have to see him walk in the cage. Say he does walk in the cage and the fights go, as planned. Obviously, I'm going with Jon Jones winning. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those cards. Like again, with him, especially having experienced it in Vegas myself. The last time I was in Vegas, it was when they had to pull Anderson Silva out of wherever he was at for UFC 200 just because Jon Jones popped hot or whatever happened. I don't even so many things, but yeah, that's the other legacy that he's leaving behind. So, what's on deck over in South Carolina? I know you talked about the recovering from the storm damage and stuff like that, but as far as events in your neck of the woods, Doc, what do we got to look forward to?
So there's not a whole lot on the horizon that I'm aware of. Some local events. The biggest recently was BKFC had their event a couple weeks ago down in Myrtle Beach. But the scene here is there's not anything huge on the horizon that I'm aware of.
Yeah, there's going to be some time, especially you talk about the freeways and stuff being shut down or the highways being down. You're going to have to clear that out. I mean, the Georgia event got canceled. That whole area really losing out on some fights. How did the BKFC card in Myrtle Beach go? I don't know if I caught that show. Did everything go smoothly?
Yeah, I wasn't actually there for that one. I had another commitment, so I wasn't able to go down. But yeah, the event went pretty smoothly. A couple of the hometown favorites didn't come out on top, so it was disappointing. A couple of a guy I know fairly well fought and lost, which was hard to see. But overall, the event was well received. I heard they had a really good crowd there. They always get a lot of people out. The place they have it down in Myrtle Beach is it's relatively easy to get to. There's lots of parking, and it's usually like a big indoor basketball court with multiple courts for like a tournament in it. So it's loud, it's exciting. It feels like a much bigger arena than it is when the events are going on, and the production value of the BKF shows is really high. So they're a lot of fun. A lot of people who went were talking about it for days afterwards online about what a great experience it is. I think it's one of the best fan experiences in MMA or boxing, as the case may be.
I forget the gentleman's name when the guy that's not Dana White, when they speak to him after events, I know they call him like a mouthpiece or whatever, but they're talking to him about the UFC doing less shows in the Apex and getting back out on the road. I mean, it's been, how long has it been since they've been in your neck of the woods?
I mean, the last time that they were here was the only time they were in South Carolina, and it was when Stephen Thompson was supposed to be the main event, but he had gotten knocked out previously. So that has to be 5 or 6 years ago now, at least.
Oh, wow.
I'd have to look and see, but I mean, it's been a while, and I haven't heard. The commission, of course, will on occasion reach out and be like, "Hey, you guys want to come?" And I don't see that chatter going on. You don't see any. I haven't heard any of the local states talking about getting a, I don't want to say a small card, but like a UFC fight night card coming. And from the UFC standpoint, I get it. I mean, their job is to make money. They own the arena in the Apex, so they can just bring people out there. They don't have to worry about selling tickets. They make all their money in the pay-per-view. Rinse and repeat, instead of putting 18 tractor trailers on the road and sending them across the country in hotels and all that kind of stuff. I get it, but man, I miss going to those regional cards. Those are awesome.
Yeah, well, the good news is they're talking about bringing them back to a much higher percent of the show. So I mean, those are the ones that you could always afford to go to as a fan. The tickets were a quarter of the price of a pay-per-view event, and they were usually they were fun. I mean. So I did see somebody writing an article how the Apex really created like a third tier of the fight. Like, now you have Apex, you have Fight Night, and you have pay-per-view, so they're kind of, they're tiering it out in a sense, but, I'm not, the Apex, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to go see an event at the Apex, but I don't know how it just doesn't seem like if I was a fighter, it would be my dream goal wouldn't certainly be to fight.
Yeah, and I think that the fight nights, as they rotate around the country, I think they do a better job of really identifying potentially, I wouldn't say unknown talent, but talent that might not be enough on the radar to bring somebody out to Vegas. But, if you're putting an event on in Greenville, you're going to have your scouts sniff around at the big MMA gyms around. And there's people in those gyms who are UFC caliber, but just haven't gotten the call, and they might not get the call to go out to Vegas. But when you got to put 10 or 15 people on, undercard, early prelims and stuff like that, they start showing up. And that was my favorite part about watching the regional cards, is seeing all the local fighters. And occasionally one of those guys shocked the world, and you're like, oh wow, this, he really deserves a chance, and off he goes.
You also get to hear like their following in a sense too. Like if you had a fighter like Patty Pimblett or somebody whose whole entrance and everything is involving the crowd, if that fighter had just been put on the Apex cards, it would be a totally different thing. So you get to find guys who are built up reputations in their hometowns. Plus, we mentioned it after Stephen Thompson's last fight. If he's going to fight again, I mean, there was a time where he's going to headline a fight night in South Carolina, maybe North Carolina, but over in that region, and and it was his chance to say goodbye to the fans that were with him from day one. I feel like that's something that would be cool to get back to, where we can where we can get out to those towns and allow the hometown fighters to kind of have their show again.
Well,
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say the gentleman at the end of the press kind of hinted at that, and then Mark Shapiro, who did that what do they call that? Those calls that the stock guys do for the companies. I'm forgetting the phrasing for it, but he said that the TKO wanted to get both WWE and the UFC events, to do more events on the road, start getting more ticket sales, and stop you doing these, the Apex type shows, because they've used the Apex for WWE as well. So hopefully they come your way, Doc.
Yeah, and I said this before, and I'll say it again. Steven's coming off a loss, but if they announced that he was going to be fighting anyone as the headliner here at the what used to be the Bilo Center, now the Bon Secours Center here in Greenville, where they had the event the last time, or anywhere in the region, but especially right in Greenville, there's not going to be an empty seat in the house. Just his, people getting a chance to see him fight live is going to put people in their seats.
2025 should be interesting too. I feel like maybe we'll see more of those, because their broadcast deal is changing, or it's going to be in a few different places. So they're going to want to find the types of events to put on what type of, network or streaming service. And I think at the end of the day, I mean, especially the streaming services, most of them, I mean, the battleground is live events with fans. And I think that'll be a plus for you, Doc, especially with I mean, that'd be perfect. That'd be something that, like, not only just filling the seats in the house, but like Matt said, I mean, there's people that are fans of Stephen Thompson just because of how long he's been in the sport and the things that he does and his attitude. And I mean, I love the guy. I follow his YouTube channel. I mean, the training tips on there, other MMA fighters need to watch.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously a world-class fighter, but his real, actual God-given talent is teaching. He is one of the best instructors of martial arts, particularly for kids, but for adults as well. It's just something he's very, very, very gifted at.
Yeah.
And it shows, which is why everybody who's ever trained with him loves him. I mean, it's very unusual if ever you hear somebody utter a bad word about him.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see that in the stuff that he puts out, because as somebody that did striking arts and traditional karate for 11 years, the stuff that he shows, I can see how, I can see the lineage from his dad to him, and how that all translates, and how he just adds that to MMA with everything else he does. And he kind of takes out all the stuff that people don't like about traditional martial arts and makes it just applicable to fighting. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He just gives you the a straight line to the technique. And I think that's what, again, he's going to make a great coach too when he's done fighting. I mean, he's definitely going to, there's going to be a lot of good fighters that can say they came under that lineage of the Thompson family.
I think so. Also, we didn't talk about it, kind of slipped under the radar despite it going down this Friday night. Mike Tyson or Jake Paul, Doc Lucas?
I cannot express to you how disappointed with the universe I will be if Mike Tyson does not win that fight.
Yeah.
I saw something today or heard something today. I don't even know if there's any truth behind it, but somebody put out that they saw a contract that said that Mike Tyson wasn't, quote unquote, allowed to win. That sounds like, somebody just making something up on Twitter.
Yeah.
But if he loses the fight, I'm going to assume that it's because he got paid millions of dollars and wasn't allowed to actually win. Because if my childhood boxing hero goes down to a YouTube celebrity, I'm going to be really disappointed.
You and me both, man.
You probably shouldn't watch. I'm afraid to tell you.
Well, guess what? I'm probably not going to watch for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
No, I'm not watching.
I'll watch it incessantly if Tyson wins. But yeah, if I watch that live and Tyson loses or gets knocked down, I mean, I don't see how I couldn't cry.
Yeah, I remember watching when Holyfield they did whatever they did with Holyfield on.
And
I forget who did.
Belfort, and he was on ice skates for 40 seconds before getting finished.
Yeah,
that's what's gonna happen, and I think that's what the average human being doesn't understand. And I don't know. I mean, I didn't even understand it completely until I saw Holyfield. But when you see these guys, it's not the punching, it's the footwork and it's the balance. And it's just, if it's there at 63 or whatever the heck Mike Tyson is, then God bless the man. But I saw him against Roy Jones Jr. And yes, they both made it to the decision, but it was not exactly. It wasn't, Ward Gotti. Like this is. I fear for the embarrassment more than the loss. Loss, if he goes out there, fights 4 or 5 rounds and goes back and forth and gets caught and put down, takes a knee and it's just too much for him at this age, I can respect that. If he goes out there and stumbles over his own feet and can't, and looks like he's on roller skates, then you're just like, that's the change. And
I just can't have some kid remember Mike Tyson as that guy who looked goofy getting pummeled by YouTube. And Jake Paul, in his defense, I mean, he definitely his boxing skills are legitimate, but we're talking about Mike Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
He's got there's going to be 30 seconds. I think I don't know how it lasts I mean, I don't know how Tyson, it would be hilarious if Mike Tyson wins the fight, but I don't know. I don't know.
That's what I'm praying for, is that, Mike Tyson in his prime when he was coming up, where you watched the fight and you knew you had to be in the seat before it started or you were going to miss it. See him come out, catch him, in a close brawl, hit one of those uppercuts from the center of the earth, and send Jake Paul sprawling. But I think that's only going to happen in my imagination.
If I'm Tyson and I got one punch and it's one big hard punch, I'm walking out there and I'm throwing a body shot from hell, and I'm hoping that's I'm either not that's it, because I think he's going to cover up in the first early. He's going to dance around, try to wear him out. I go one body shot, one big hook to the body. If he can put everything into one of those, I think that would be his best chance to kind of change the course of the fight.
Yeah. My only hope is that Jake Paul is interested enough as a showman to try to make it exciting. Because, I mean, the way to beat Tyson would clearly to be exactly what you said. Go out, try to shell up, move around, make him chase you, make it a boring first, second, third round. And then when he's maybe tired, try to pour it on. I'm hoping Jake Paul is interested in making things look exciting, is willing to stand there and trade with him. Yeah. But we'll see.
Well, he did say that he would when they were out here in August at the Fanatics Fest, but I don't think a lot of people saw that press conference, so chances are he's banking on people not remembering that. But if he's a man of his word and he tries to at least go toe to toe with Tyson, that'll give all three of us what we want to see. Hopefully,
we'll see. So, anyways, anything you got to promote, John, or not this time?
Not currently. Things are pretty stable around here. So nothing big on the horizons.
Cool. All right. Well, fans can check out the show at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me, Matthew Hawkins, at MMAHawk21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter, Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. Thank you for your time, John.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good night.